So overall, one of the good barometers that we look at is taking the speed statistics here. This is actually from 2020, and you can see that the rise in headsets for connected in the millions has gone up quite a bit during this time frame. What this means now is we definitely have an audience now available for these different types of virtual reality experiences and such. But this is only kind of the beginning. If we look at overall expenditures, the predictions, I actually had to revise some of these numbers when we looked at them, but around 2019, 10.8 billion. That's actually down about 3 billion because we were actually expected to be a little bit higher, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Then you have 18.3 billion, right? So 2020 is still a little bit going to be a little bit more of a less spending year. But we still are on track if you look at overall kind of projections of where people are going with technology, capabilities, to really get into 136 billion year in the 2021 to 2024 phase. So a lot of that though is going to be expenditures on hardware to get us there. This is just kind of a quick little example of showing you, AR Artillery puts out this nice diagram here of showing you where some of those expenditures are in the millions. If you look here, around 2022, a lot of it is really going into content and app, as well as consumer AR glasses and enterprise content. That will continue to change as more and more consumers start to learn about these technologies. So I'm really excited about that. The penetration of AR glasses, well, it's a very small part of the population because the cost is still extremely prohibitive to some of these items here. But as we continue forward, we're going to get more and more sophisticated, of course, and soon we'll be into the same wars that we were in before, where it's like, how much resolution can I generate? Industry interest, I talk about this a lot, but still kind of gaming is going strong in the VR ecosystem and in the AR ecosystem, a little bit slower. Training and education has definitely emerged as a huge component. I get a lot of people asking me for personally to say build the training experience for XYZ. But just like anything, you have to have a good idea of kind of what you're trying to build and why you're trying to build it. Real estate, construction, and health and medical are definitely taking a huge leaps into VR, especially now with things like, coming up with the COVID safety training protocols in VR, so you don't actually have to expose someone before they get into these types of dangerous scenarios. So, a lot of good stuff there. I showed this before, but this is kind of showing you in training where some of those aspects are coming from, right? So, we really have, looking at that, we really have the de-escalation of a situation, cost reduction to help that, fantastical situations like I mentioned before, maybe a nuclear power plant, physical safety and danger, and then you have experiential learning, empathy building, helping people to feel like they're part of everything, as well as procedures, and then of course emergency reaction, whether it be danger training or things like that. So a lot of that is really driving these mechanisms forward a lot. So it's really exciting to see how far we are coming specifically in this training area because it's definitely where the most growth is. So I showed this a little bit before, but it's still a really good chart, and I like this chart here from HBR. Harvard Business Review. So I showed this a little bit. A lot of companies are saying that training retention has increased specifically within VR. When you look at it, you can rate company 8% year over year compared to traditional training methods. And then we have this study by Beijing and Focus, which is focus on training compared to traditional high school classrooms, and found that the students in VR really were outperforming students that taught in traditional settings. The students in traditional education group scored an average of 73%, while in the final test, whereas those in the VR group scored an average of 93%. So there's definitely, I've done a lot of research on this area myself as well. VR does really help to increase that intention and retention across the board when you're trying to get people to learn in different ways. And so there's a couple other studies on here as well, but this was just a really fun chart that I had spent a lot of time with. So, but getting back to the core of this this simple talk, and I call it simple, is a long time ago, I laughed because I can't show it here, unfortunately, in virtual reality, but I sat down with a friend at lunch, probably, I don't know, a little bit 5 years ago now, and I started to draw it out on a piece of napkin, and I still have the napkin to this day. I just keep it around as a piece of stuff. And I really started to draw my rules around multidimensional design systems and kind of how we need to build up this ecosystem to go forward. And Karen here actually has helped with some of these documentations and these diagrams here, and so you kind of see what's going on here at that image where these are different layer segmentations. Now this is one way to represent this, but in this talk what I really wanted to talk about is what are those building blocks that are necessary in order to get like to that Iron Man-esque sci-fi level system that I showed earlier. So I'm going to move on to that a little bit and talk through that. This is a brand new diagram. No one's really seen this yet. This is a breakdown of essentially my napkin piece that I sketched out 5 years ago, but now adding a lot more capability to it. So the larger document's not going to really show up well here, but I will show snippets of it for now. But really the key element when you think about how you get to a state of creating a always-on, unified interaction design system that exists within inside of an augmented world is really about permanency and making people feel like they can get there from one day to the next. That that's going to exist and that's going to be there. And so when I started to look at this, I started to break this down into a system. So if you think about what I have over here, it says, imagine a future like the sci-fi movies of easy on, also always available world augmentation. These are the foundational building blocks that get us to this point. And this is just based upon a lot of my research, as well as a lot of research around specifically thinking about what needs to pass. I've had the fortune now to build a lot of these different systems and such, so I actually get to provide some insight into this. From this, I'm actually put together a dimensional readiness grade, and it's currently looking at a few attributes. This is my V1 alpha, if you will. But we have ease of use, cost, reliability, and existence. So some of these things that I mentioned when I go to the next slide won't actually exist yet. So that is a big challenge that's going to come forward, is how do we get to some of these if they don't exist? The first part is really just kind of acknowledging the necessity for them. As a UX professional, I think this is really the next new frontier for information architects, and trying to show information architects on how they can build things really creatively and interesting for the future. So let's zoom in a little bit here, and I'll kind of break down a few of these. So it starts at the bottom here, and it really starts with the chips, the sensors, and you've seen this in some of my other talks to a degree, but not to this level. But the enabling technology is really about what's necessary to be built as microchips and SDKs that allow the systems to process in real time spatial data. Now we've come a little ways in this, but my grade on this is still sitting around C, based upon kind of what we've used. And that's based upon kind of these aspects of ease of use, cost, reliability, and just does it exist and is it readily available. If you move up from that tier, you start to look at the next contextual, the next object on the building blocks is really looking at spatial mapping tools. The tools that enable the scanning and mapping of the experience, as well as depth, LiDAR, etc. So we've come a little bit further here, but honestly, on the Android side, it's still lacking quite a bit. And on the iOS side, up until the newer devices, it's still lacking as well. And I think we're really going to have to come up with a couple more devices in this space to kind of live up to that, whether it be a head-mounted device that is built into the top of a Wi-Fi unit and does a LiDAR scan projection across the room each day, or an interval subsection. It's some of these things that we're going to have in order to kind of get to that level of everyday usage, and of course helping us drive more towards the discussion that I said earlier, having this holographic projection working correctly. The next step from that is really looking at location, recall, and persistence. So when I talk about that, it's really does this thing that I created in an augmented state, does it exist as if it has permanency? Meaning it's going to be there tomorrow, it'll be there the next day, and other people can start to rely upon it. Now, I've been fortunate enough to work on a lot of these different tools that kind of start to play a little bit with that permanency. And it's a little bit of an emotional shift, certainly from a customer side and even from a business side, is if the physical objects can remain constant, they can be constantly updated and constantly inside the location, you start to think about it differently in the way that you interact with it.
Hi, how are you doing? Would you like to know more about this product?
And it's a little bit of an emotional shift, certainly from a customer side, and even from a business side. If the physical objects can remain constant, they can somewhere in the world around you. And this kind of led me into a lot of really thinking around 4 tiers of dimensional classifications. I call them DCs. And essentially, it's similar to the previous chart that I had up a moment ago. But when thinking about the higher level hierarchies of all of these different ecosystems, you have to have a good information architecture as well as good taxonomy and classification to truly understand how to capture all of this data, not just for capturing it, but also for replaying it. And that framework is crucial to build out because without it, it doesn't allow for a lot of reusability or sustainability of that presence, as well as it makes relocalization a challenge inside the ecosystem. I've done a lot of research. So every single one of these building blocks, I could talk for hours and hours and days about how you would go about approaching them and what you would do to move that forward. But I'm going to continue on up the channel here to get to really manual and AI procedural checkpoints. So when I think about the manual and AR procedural classifications, there really needs to be two modes of recognition. One needs to be the human component, where we actually are looking at objects within the space that exist within inside of our spatial mapping classifications, allowing for human interaction to both classify and help identify what those are, not unlike what Google had did in the past with Google Images, as well as allowing for that data to be fed back into a neural model, something like probably more complex than TensorFlow or any of those today, and ultimately help people to understand that what they're seeing in its variations, there might be a sofa that's larger or smaller or bigger or a chair, that we get better with the classification autonomously. That's important because it really helps us to handle the aspects of occlusion. In that image I showed earlier, it shows you how the holograms come out and they're not necessarily occluding any of the other images or holograms in the place, and they're not necessarily obscured by other places, and they're fitting within the right height and the right dimensions. So the reason this is so important is we need to understand not just what's in the view space of what we're trying to interact with, but as you start to add motion within that space, we have to understand what you have to move around in order to work with objects inside of that world. And above and beyond that is really the next step. This is the holy grail, or as I like to call it, the hologram grail. Yes, I know, dumb joke aside. However, it's really the contextual action models. At this point, it's really taking a look at the combination of sophisticated computer vision as well as pre-trained human models and saying, what can we anticipate that this action will happen specifically from this object and or multiple objects that exist in the room. So we know that as a person you can sit on a couch, right? But as a computer program or as an augmented AI, an AAI, what you're going to basically do is it's going to have to be smart enough to know that, yes, I could present a hologram on that plane. Right now, we're to the point where we can recognize some of these planes of the couch separate from the existing mesh data, but without further classification, we still can't understand the context of it. We know that's a plane, but it's still challenging to understand, is it an object? And then furthermore, what can we actually do with that object now that we understand that? So definitely some contextual action models can be built around that and different layers of information hierarchy to kind of help supplant that. So moving up next, this is my own kind of definition as you saw previously, just to go back a slide here. This is the personal augmentation layer, and it's really meant to be a classification of all of these different substructures that I showed you before. Those substructures can be really a group of data. So I call this VIA, which is virtual information architecture, as well as personal interaction points, as well as social interaction points, as well as what I call DOs, dimensional occupancies. Those can be both virtual as well as physical occupancies within a space. But what this personal augmentation layer does is not unlike what we have today with a cloud preference, which, by the way, we don't really have good cloud preferences yet. That's why this is kind of an F. Is you can kind of begin to think about how you can classify your own home life work relationship. And why is this important? It's important because, much like all of the other tiers, is once we understand that this is my working activities layer, this is my home life, this is my business, all of these different layers are ultimately helping you determine specifically what types of interactions from an augmentation standpoint can occur here. And that's going to be really important because living in several holographic experiments myself and working with holographic design and augmented design, it can get really messy really quick. So the quicker we're able to solve the organizational challenge, the easier it is going to be able to get these things into the right structures, much less call them up when there's a task or activity that presents itself. And that really brings us to a higher level hierarchy here. Not unlike kind of where we are a little bit with OpenXR to a degree, is we are now looking at specifically dimensional data model frameworks. This is where it starts to get tricky. So each new representative of a PAL or represented augmentation layer can exist as part of a dimensional hierarchy view state. This is where the complexity grows as we need to be able to apply deep understanding and situational awareness to dimensionally shift without user interaction. So in effect, this is what I call autonomous contextual shift. So this means that you can build a layer upon a layer, and you can essentially have this onion type effect, which you can't see very well here. It's in this particular image, but it's back here. See if I can zoom in a little bit. And what happens in that state is really you now can start to lay dimensions on top of each other. That for me is probably the next holy grail overall, is being able to lay a dimension on top of it and have it coexist with other ones. But it's a really exciting prospect to get there because we need to have all these different pieces in place to truly take advantage of that. And that's when we start to get to more of this sci-fi capability, because now we have the appropriate means to enable, we have the appropriate means to map the space, we can localize ourselves, and we can figure out persistence. We can provide classifications of these dimensional aspects, these dimensional classifications. We can provide our own manual and procedural classifications to that model. And then furthermore, we can provide more contextual action models on top of that to help understand what we should or could be doing. And then ultimately, that starts to define your own personal preferences on how you would want to interact with this data on a day-to-day basis, because we have all of those definition states in place, ultimately leading up to more deeper data modeling frameworks now that work much like I would expect a traditional API would in this sense once we get there. So that was just a kind of a brief overview of what it's going to take really to kind of get to the fantastical piece that I showed you before back here. You can go back a few slides here, because to get this data at your fingertips, you first have to figure out how to build all of the pieces of the puzzle to get you there. So it's easy on, easy off, easy out of the way, and easy ready to go. So that's my short presentation today. Hopefully I opened your mind or expanded this. I'll be doing a few more talks on this, of course, probably this year. But yeah, any questions out there I can take in the audience if anyone can still hear me out there. Lose any of our audience? Oh, I see someone moving in. Molly, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Did I blow people's minds?
It started raining. I don't know if you could hear the rain.
Yeah, a little bit. It's funny.
Is there a way to mute ourselves?
Yeah, it's down. If you look down at your legs, you should see a mute button. I muted you. Now
Okay.
I unmuted you.
Okay.
Sure. I think I have an admin power. I can mute and unmute, right, Sky? All right. Hello, RJ.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, this is impressive.
Hi. Where are you coming from?
I'm Dallas. I've been to some of the other alt space meetings, but this is obviously a different animal.
Yeah, this is our animal. Yeah, I helped build this.
How long have y'all been working on this?
Sky's been working on it for a while. I think we probably put a year into it, give or take. But yeah, this is the expo format of it. You know, with really, for businesses, they can have their own kind of expo hall event in here, as you can kind of see around the board here. And then I'm, of course, at the at the presentation table, if you will, at the live speaker. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do here. But yeah, I remember laying down the first floor tile in here. Virtual floor tile, but I do remember laying down the first floor tile. It's pretty funny. So I'm glad you can make it in to come in and see this and kind of join us on the bleeding edge here. You're on your Mac? Is it working all right on your Mac?
Yeah. I was unsure if I was getting all the feeds until I heard some other people talking, but now it seems to be working great.
Cool. And were you able to hear my presentation all right? I don't know if that came through.
Yeah, no, that was
cool.
Was good.
Cool. Yeah, so we're just trying to, this was a good, I like to do real world tests and break things. So, yeah, we had a couple people in and out. I know there's probably, I think there's still an audio issue going on the Quest device, I suspect. But
yeah, my friend Ian, my coworker, is trying to join through Quest, and he is having some audio issues.
Okay. Yeah, there's a permission that's weird in the Quest that I noticed that sometimes doesn't get activated. I don't know if you're there still. Apparently, I think Sky jumped in, and we actually, I think we're streaming live too to YouTube right now. So, yeah, I'm assuming that is what just happened.
Yeah, clearly a lot going on.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were streaming live to YouTube, but apparently we are. So we have a lot of ways to engage, as you can see.
Yeah, in fact, I'm anxious to try it on Quest and on HoloLens.
Yeah, the HoloLens version is pretty good. I haven't used the HoloLens version in a while, and honestly, for me, it's the thing is I usually actually use the iPad version the most.
Oh, okay.
When we're in here, but for this instance, I have two monitors up, and so I have my presentation on one monitor over here. But yeah, I was actually very pleased. Everything, I had a minor bobble this morning, but everything other than that was earlier today, but everything was working well. Okay, it's really crazy to hear my voice live through YouTube here on the other channel. But yeah, any questions I can answer about any of the presentation, or you want to take a tour around here real quick? I can spin this around. So
Yes, you guys
you
are
see
still
the,
being streamed live.
Yeah.
the glass
Stream.
elevator. You want to follow me there?
Okay.
Molly was there.
Hey, Preston. Should I stop the live stream? Should I stop the live stream, Preston? Hello?
Hey, you can stop the live stream if you didn't hear me.
Oh, okay, okay. Perfect. Well,
I'm just giving a little demo here.
okay, go ahead, guys.
Come on in.
Oh, yeah.
All aboard.
Yay!
So up here, these are penthouse.
Oh no, I think Preston dropped down. Okay, step aside, away from the elevator. Oh, that's bound to happen.
I broke the elevator. I fell out of the elevator. I'm okay.
Hey, welcome back.
Yeah, I jumped the elevator. That was what happened. So these are the private suites up here. So the objective or the goal over here is like if you're off in the main showroom floor and you're meeting with someone and you're like, hey, I'd like to have a more talk with you privately around there, you can kind of come up in here and chat. This goes to its own chat channel, I believe, right, Sky?
Yes, and you also get your own private screen share. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you get your own private screen share up here.
Cool.
So you can kind of have a continuous discussion. I showed this earlier to Molly, but like, we also have other tools within here, so yeah, I can draw.
So, like, what kind of events have y'all had up to now? Like, who's taken advantage of this?
So we haven't done anything yet. We're still kind of testing the water here, but we have been kind of preparing to market some more to some different things. Ideally, I'm really looking at things that are on the expo side of things, right? Like you have like a medical